Hey guys, it's the BC Andrews Critiquer, a name I really should consider changing in future. Anyway, what happened to my collaboration with Murray Reactions on the Music Man Old vs. New? Don't worry, it's still happening, it's just been slightly delayed due to our conflicting work schedules. Anyway, what do I think of peanuts? The plant? Hate them. Peanut butter? Despise it. Always have, always will. But what about the most famous newspaper comic strip and animated specials of all time? Absolutely, frickin' love them.
Yeah, for 72 years now, good old Charlie Brown and his gang have never ceased to entertain us with their zany antics, witty writing, and just about everything featuring Snoopy and Woodstock, but also for covering many emotional and serious issues like one's best friend moving away, someone you love suffering from a toxic illness, and I think best of all, providing a brilliant commentary in their most famous special of all time about how commercialism and greed often distract us from how Christmas is really about the day our Savior came to save us from eternal damnation, as well as a subtle commentary on how people often find religious tales retold in a more modernized fashion to be sacrilegious. That's not something you see often in media, but one component I feel often gets overlooked is the movies. I mean, they aren't necessarily forgotten, but when one brings up the Peanuts cartoons, the 5 theatrical films are seldomly brought up, and I think that's a shame because these films are really good. Okay, not all of them are revolutionary, but the ones that are have some of the most powerful moments in the whole Peanuts lineup, both high and low. And even the non-revolutionary films still have some good in them. So in light of Charlie Brown's first voice actor Peter Robbins' recent passing a few months ago, I decided that I would be the one to venture into Charlie Brown's cinema career and rank all 5 of his theatrical movies from weakest to greatest. Now keep in mind, I don't think any of these films are bad per se. Hell, I don't think you can make a bad Charlie Brown product. Some are just not Schulz's finest work in my opinion. And again, this is all my own silly personal opinion, and I respect yours if you don't agree with my rankings. But anyway, these are all 5 theatrical Peanuts movies ranked. Number 5. Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown. Of all 5 theatrical Peanuts films, this one is probably the least remembered, and yeah, I'd be lying if I said I didn't kinda see why. The premise is pretty simplistic. Charlie Brown and some other characters go to summer camp and have a wacky races like water race with these asshole campers, and that's pretty much it. So I think you already see why this is at the bottom of the list. This is a premise that would have been much more appropriate for a 30-minute special as opposed to a big screen movie. Hell, there was already a special about Charlie Brown going to summer camp a few years prior, and this just feels like an extended version of that special, just with a wacky races-like subplot to pad it out. But even with that, plus a variety of other filler, it still feels like a TV special. But padded and generic premise aside, is this still an entertaining Peanuts installment? Well, Snoopy and Woodstock sure don't disappoint, but then again, when do they ever? But in regards to the kids, I think the girls are frickin' hilarious, especially with this running joke of how literally every frickin' decision they make involves them voting on it, no matter how severe or urgent the situation is.
1 vote to get off the reef. 2 votes to get off the reef. The question before the group is whether we allow the boys to join our party or we leave them. Didn't you hear me? We're freezing! Chuck, it's all very democratic.
Kind of a subtle commentary on how democracy isn't a completely flawless system, but for the most part the boys are surprisingly forgettable. Yeah, I'm sorry, but they just don't have that many memorable scenes or lines in this movie. That and Charlie Brown's voice just didn't sound quite right.
I decided to come to camp because I don't think I've ever been much of a person. I thought maybe coming to camp would help me grow up.
I can't quite pinpoint why, it just didn't sound very, well, Charlie Brownish to me. But is there anything else to remember in this movie? Well, the bullies the gang races against are probably the most despicable characters in the entire Peanuts franchise. Not only do they make the bullies from Why Charlie Brown Why look nice by comparison, hell, even Lucy, Patty, and Frida at their absolute worst to Charlie Brown are saints compared to these 3, but if I'm not mistaken, these guys are the only Peanuts characters who have ever attempted to frickin' commit murder in canon. Like during the race, they come across a sign warning them that one path will lead towards some mountain blasting from construction the next morning at 10 AM. So they frickin' switch the sign to point towards the safe path, so Chuck and the gang will go down the path with the mountain blasting frickin' happening. Not even Billy or Trevor from Stranger Things would stoop that low. Hell, I'm not even sure Frank Gallagher would. But is one murder attempt not enough to make you despise these assholes? Well, how about two? Well, kind of. Namely by putting a shortcut sign that leads the gang down a water wheel slide, and then they jam the wheel, leaving them stuck up there. Okay, maybe that's not as cold-blooded as leading them down a river with boulders frickin' falling down everywhere, but still, there were no other people for miles, and they were bound to die of starvation by the time anyone discovered them. Yeah, these bullies are probably the closest thing the Peanuts franchise has ever had to actual full-on villains, and the kids who voice them do such a great job at making us despise these assholes with their performances. Also, despite Charlie Brown's miscast voice, he is noticeably more confident in this film than usual. Not as much as other movies that I'll mention a bit later down the list, but he really does shine as the leader, saving the gang while they're stuck on the top of the wheel, and also standing up to Peppermint Patty's taking advantage of him for, well, the only time in the whole series as I can recall. So yeah, this movie does indeed have its moments, but it was definitely more suited for a 30-minute special instead of an entire movie, and suffers from a miscast Charlie Brown voice actor and lackluster portrayals of the boys, and thus comes off as the weakest in Charlie Brown's cinema installments. Number 4. It's kind of funny in hindsight that this was the title, because Charlie Brown sure did into the silver screen for over 35 years after this movie underperformed at the box office. Of course, he'd later make his return with the Peanuts movie to great critical and commercial success, but does the fact that this is the movie that killed Charlie Brown's cinema career for decades mean it's a bad movie? Not at all. But does that mean it's a great movie? Well, let's take a look. The plot revolves around Charlie Brown, Linus, Peppermint Patty, and Marcy being selected for a foreign student exchange program, which means a free trip to Paris for the gang. They take a flight to London, then a boat to France with some hilarious Peanuts mishaps along the way, eventually making it to their exchange families. Peppermint Patty and Marcy stay with this friendly boy called Pierre, who helps them adjust to the foreign culture of France, and Patty quickly takes a liking to, but of course won't be caught dead admitting it.
I think he's falling for me. What can I do? I hate to let the kid down. I guess I have to be polite.
But the boys are not so lucky, since it turns out the member of their transfer family who invited them was only the young daughter of a cold-hearted baron who did so without her pop's permission, and being the asshole he is, he has no intention of letting them into his house. So yeah, in terms of a developed story, this film is only a marginal improvement over Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown. Hell, there's hardly even a story at all until around the third act when the gang is settling in Paris. Until then, it's mostly just Peanuts gags involving foreign travel, but even so, that's not a type of gag we often get in Peanuts, and most of them hit bullseye.
Blimey, it's a bit dicey understanding these Yanks.
Bit hard, mate. I feel proper Charlie not understanding, but can you say it slow? Once more.
Very generous of you to give your share to the car. Notice how well the car is running since you gave it some bread?
Plus, the lack of a more developed story is a little more forgivable here, because in this version the gang goes to Europe, a tad more exciting and worthy of a theatrical film than just going to summer camp, and the layouts of London and Paris are really damn good. They're simple enough to be in the Peanuts simplistic design universe, but still have the time and effort to make them look almost museum-worthy. Another really cool thing is, this is one of the only Peanuts installments ever where we actually see and hear adults. No, not just Silahoots or the... We fully see and hear them in this film. How neat is that? Never thought you'd see a grown-up in a Peanuts installment, did you? And the more legit story that does start in the third act is actually kind of interesting. The chemistry between Pierre and Peppermint Patty is kind of cute, and you're probably wondering why the daughter Violet invited them there behind her pop's back. Well, after she sneaks them out some food that night to make them more comfortable, her pop says he's gonna shoot them if they're not off his property by morning. So I guess the boys are not the only Peanuts characters who have ever attempted murder, though maybe that's more self-defense shooting of trespassers, but I have better things to contemplate. So she tells them they gotta scram, but Linus demands she explain to them why she invited them there when they were clearly not wanted. So she explains to them that it was because Charlie Brown's grandfather, a former American Air Force pilot, was a dear friend of her grandmother's and stayed in that house while fighting in World War II. They moved on after the war ended and each had families of their own, but never forgot each other and stayed in touch via mail for years. So Violet was really curious to meet the grandson of her grandmother's former lover. But then a fire breaks out with the two of them inside, making for a relatively intense climax where Charlie and the gang have to save them. After this, Violet's pop decides Chuck is alright and allows him to live comfortably in his house for the rest of his visit. So yeah, story-wise, this is definitely not much of an improvement over Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown, but with lovely European visuals and gags, actual adults seen and heard on screen in a Peanuts product, and a relatively well-written and dramatic third act, it's definitely a better film than that one. Number 3.
Snoopy, Snoopy, come home, Snoopy, come home.
Like I mentioned in my Hilda review, this is probably the best known theatrical Peanuts movie after, well, the Peanuts movie. But on a gloomier note, I'm kind of surprised that this wasn't the film that killed the Peanuts film series for decades, seeing how it only made a lousy $245,000 at the box office. Man, if a film can't even gross $1 million... Come on, you know I'm right. But that didn't stop it from receiving critical acclaim and highly successful video sales when the VCR was introduced a few years later. So what's the premise? Well, like I said in the Hilda video, the episode The Deer Fox is essentially a shortened version of this film. Snoopy's lately been getting the cold shoulder, not just from the Peanuts gang, but also from society in general.
No dogs allowed. You're not a crowd.
But then he receives a message from his previous owner, Lila, saying she's in the hospital and would love for him to come and see her. So, seeing how everyone but Woodstock is treating him like, well, Snoopy accepts the invitation and he and Woodstock go on a cross-country road trip facing more dog discrimination.
No dogs allowed.
An Elmira Duff prototype.
When you've got a chum who scuffs into your numb, that's fundamental from dependability.
And just the general hardships of the great outdoors. But he finally makes it to Lila, and the two have such a great time that Snoopy decides he wants to return to her, seeing how that old blockhead and his gang don't seem to give a rat's ass about him anymore. But turns out they do, and are really concerned for the missing beagle, and even throw him a farewell party when he returns to break the news of his decision to return to Lila. But is Snoopy really certain he wants to leave good old Charlie Brown? Oh, who am I kidding? You know he'll come back to him. So anyway, is this movie really as awesome as people say? Well, yeah, it really is. But first I have to point out a few problems I have with it. 1. Charlie Brown's voice actor here sucks. Granted, the voice itself is fitting, but the kid who plays him is just...
It's almost dark. Snoopy isn't home yet. I wonder where that dog is. There he is. I wonder where he's been all day.
Ugh. Also, I feel the way the gang turns on Snoopy is a little contrived. At least in the Deer Fox, Hilda and Johanna were neglecting Twig because of their daily lives, Hilda with her supernatural adventures and Johanna with her architectural designs. And granted, Peppermint Patty gets cold towards the canine because she thinks he stood her up at their outing at the beach when he was actually kicked out by the dog-hating people who ran it. But the rest of the kids just seem to suddenly decide they hate the beagle out of nowhere. Even Charlie Brown basically tells Snoopy that he's a huge burden. I feel there should have been a bit more build-up towards what made the kids start to lose interest in Snoopy. As is, they come off as really unlikable. But those are really the only legitimately bad things about this movie. First off, this is the first Peanuts film on this list that seems to have a legit 3-act story, and just the premise of Snoopy almost deciding to leave good old Charlie Brown and return to his original owner is a pretty dramatic premise, and the movie executes its drama quite well. While I wouldn't say the reactions of the kids to Snoopy's disappearance are quite as emotional as Hilda's to Twig's, they are still pretty tear-jerking. Even the otherwise terrible kid who voices Charlie Brown does save a bit of face with these scenes. Another high here is that the songs are written by none other other than the Sherman Brothers, if that fundamental friend dependability song didn't make that frickin' obvious. Not to mention some great singers like Thurl Ravenscroft and that chorus who was in just about every 1970s Dr. Seuss TV special. And the humor itself sure doesn't disappoint.
Forget it, kid.
I hate reading. I just want to be a good housewife.
Okay, maybe that gag didn't age too well. If there is one other small nitpick I'd have, it would be how Lila and Snoopy part ways. Like I mentioned in my Hilda review, they discover her apartment doesn't allow dogs, and Snoopy, who is already having second thoughts about leaving Chuck, is pretty much like, dog crap happens, sayonara. I know it's kind of funny, but I don't know, these two just seem to have such a sweet bond, and Snoopy just seems so cold to Lila here. I wish it had been more of an understanding mutual agreement from Lila about how much he loves Charlie Brown, kind of like with Twig's parents in the Deer Fox. That's just my opinion though, you may find it frickin' hilarious. While I personally feel the Deer Fox did this premise much better, I can't deny that this film did it pretty damn good as well. It's a pretty nice blend of Peanuts humor and also emotional drama, and ultimately proves that like with Hilda and Twig, Charlie Brown and Snoopy also have
Fundamental dependability.
Number 2. The Peanuts movie. Yeah, like most people, I wasn't quite sure how this was going to turn out. I mean, CGI renditions of hand-drawn cartoons very rarely, if ever, produce anything of acceptable quality, but while Blue Sky certainly wasn't the most revolutionary CGI animation studio, when they did get a film right, they really got it right. Plus, they got Steve Martino, the director of Blue Sky's adaptation of Horton Hears a Who, to do this film, which is considered by many to be the most faithful and respectful Dr. Seuss movie adaptation out there, so I went to this movie with an open mind. And sure enough, Martino was every bit as faithful and respectful to Peanuts as he was with Horton, translating the simplistic but charming animation and humor of Peanuts to a big-budget CGI film almost flawlessly. Not to mention Charlie Brown is voiced by none other than Will Byers from Stranger Things, or more accurately his actor Noah Schnapp. So what is the story? Basically the origin of how Charlie Brown met the little red-haired girl he always fantasized about in the comics but we never saw on screen. It was love at first sight and he tries everything he can to impress her, but being Charlie Brown, nothing he tries goes right. That is until his standardized test is switched with Peppermint Patty's, who despite all odds actually aced it and thus becomes the star student. But of course he discovers the error and his conscience forces him to confess, thus rendering him the black sheep of the school again. Plus he accidentally gets he and the little red-haired girl's book report destroyed and they're gonna fail the assignment. But wait, why'd she still choose him for a pen pal before she leaves for summer camp? So yeah, the story's the fairly cliched loser tries to win the girl story we've seen hundreds of times in media. Doesn't sound much better than the plot of Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown, so why is this number 2 on the list? Well, I think I should point out that Charlie's love for the little red-haired girl was one of the best known bits of the original strips and specials, so of all things to have a CGI Peanuts movie focus on, that was perfect. I mean, face it, if this movie had been this big adventure film or something, people would probably have accused this film of not understanding Schulz. The other Peanuts movies had the excuse that Schulz was heavily involved with them, but since this one did not, they really had to pick a premise that captured the spirit of the comics. But wait, isn't showing the little red-haired girl a betrayal to the comics? I mean, Schulz sure thought so the only time she ever appeared in a special. Well, it's really a matter of opinion, but mine is not if it's done right. And thankfully, this movie does it right. For one, we never actually see the little red-haired girl's face for most of the movie, and we only hear her speak a couple times, and those are for the most dramatic moments, like when she finds the book report has been destroyed.
Good grief. Maybe we can fix it.
And how about the happy ending? Well, in Peanuts, Charlie Brown really only gets a happy ending if he works extra hard for it. And like said before, Charlie Brown goes through a lot of trials and tribulations in his quest to win over the little redhead. And when he's racing to try and see her before she goes off to camp to ask why she still wanted to be his pen pal, yeah, it's pretty freaking hilarious. but we still feel his pain with this universe going extra hard to try and torment him. But he sticks to it, and fate finally throws him a bone by finally allowing his kite to fly. Kudos for allowing him to do that too. Allowing him to finally catch her just in time, with all the kids following in excitement of Chuck finally mastering kite flying. And the scene that follows when he finally gets to see her and we fully see her face. Just see for yourself.
Why, out of all the kids in our class, would you want to be partners with me?
That's easy. Because I've seen the type of person you are. I like the compassion you showed for your sister at the talent show. The honesty you had at the assembly. And at the dance. You were brave. And funny. So when I look at you, I don't see a failure at all. You have all the qualities that I admire. I'll write to you, pen pal.
Personally, I not only think Charles Schulz and Bill Melendez would have approved this scene if they saw it up from heaven, I think they would have been astounded. The way that special I mentioned earlier introduced her was really crappy and had little thought put into such a big moment, so it's hardly a wonder he didn't approve of it. But this movie had all the thought you could put into this big scene, making for one of Charlie Brown's finest moments. But not his finest one ever. Speaking of which... And the #1 theatrical Peanuts movie is... A Boy Named Charlie Brown. Oh boy, this is the one I've been most excited to talk about, because in my opinion, this is the most powerful and best written Peanuts product ever after A Charlie Brown Christmas. Not to mention Charlie Brown's first voice actor Peter Robbins' final time playing the character. The story is almost perfect. Charlie Brown's natural unluckiness has been to the max lately, where he seems to be a failure at just about every little thing he does. To add insult to injury, Lucy has also been especially prickish to old Chuck lately, so Charlie Brown decides enough of this crap. He's going to enter the school spelling bee and finally be a champion. Linus helps him study, and Charlie Brown wins, becoming the class hero! But then learns that this means he's now their school representative in the national spelling bee. Chuck's naturally pretty nervous about the huge pressure, but is determined to maintain his title as Champion Charlie Brown and study his ass off. So he heads off to New York with Linus giving him his blanket for good luck, and then catching a bus to New York almost immediately after because he's suffering from withdrawal, and before they know it, it's time for the big spelling bee. So again, in my opinion, this is the second most powerful Peanuts product ever, both positively and negatively. Like said before, this film really kicks Charlie Brown around for a lot of it, and a big part of what inspires Chuck to enter the spelling bee is that Lucy, Patty, and Violet sing quite possibly the most emotionally destroying and insulting song that was ever composed in the history of humankind. Even Rucka Rucka Ali would be mortified if he heard it.
You never do anything right. You never put anything in its place. You're so impossibly dumb. In history books, your name daily rates. Or else they're bound to call you failure face. And in the race to be stupid, you set a brand new kind of pace.
I mean, failure face. If you called a kid that in 2022, you'd probably be suspended. But on the positive side, winning the school spelling bee comes with an awesome song called Champion Charlie Brown. That's the opposite of failure face in every way. It's just so heartwarming and uplifting and, well, just listen for yourself.
Champion Charlie Brown, that has a lovely ring. Something to make a 4-column headline, something the kids can sing. Champion Charlie Brown, he's got to be the best. Top of the heap when it comes to spelling, better than all the rest.
As awesome as Charlie Brown's newfound popularity was in the Peanuts movie, here it's just amazing. This might be Charlie Brown's highest moment in all Peanuts history, after the tree decorating and singing Hark the Herald Angels sequence in the Christmas special, and just a tad above the sequence where he and the little red-haired girl talk. I mean, considering Lucy now wants to be his agent, well...
You did it!
Anyway, before we talk about the big spelling bee scene, let's talk about some other highs in this movie. While this film doesn't have quite as many gags due to its more serious story, what it does have does not disappoint. Linus literally goes through withdrawal without his blanket that's eerily similar to someone deprived of drugs or alcohol, and just about every scene of this is a frickin' comedy goldmine. Another great thing is the visuals. Besides having noticeably smoother animation being a movie and all, the visuals and mini-scenes are just so artistically trippy, some almost make Pink Floyd's The Wall look normal. The only downside though is that the normal down-to-earth layouts are still pretty cheap looking, and not in a charmingly cheap way, just cheap. But anyway, how does the big spelling bee in the climax go? Well, being what might improve Charlie Brown's social standing forever, it's really exciting. The other contestants, such as Linus's blonde-haired long-lost twin brother and Patty's curly-haired long-lost twin sister, are eliminated one by one, until it's down to Charlie and Schroeder's completely identical long-lost twin brother. The two correctly spell several words for a while until it's Chuck's turn, and the final word of the evening? Beagle. Yes! That's a relatively simple word, and that's the kind of dog Snoopy is. Yep, Charlie Brown has finally cemented his title as Champion Charlie
B-E-A-G-E-L. Beagle.
Ugh!
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 Charlie Brown, you make me mad!
Oh, Chuck, you were so close! Anyway, the scene of the gang riding home is really powerful, with little dialogue and mostly just focusing on Charlie Brown's heartbrokenness over blowing this opportunity he had to change his title from Failure Face to Champion Charlie Brown forever. A really impressive thing is, even though the melody on the bus is very upbeat and bright, it somehow adds to the mood of this dramatic scene. I have no clue how, but if you manage to have upbeat music make a sad scene even sadder, that's really impressive. Then we get some nice legit sad music as Charlie Brown sadly gets off the bus with no one there to greet him, heads home in silence, gets ready for bed with this expression that just says, "I'm just done." He tells Linus the next day that he's just going to spend the rest of his life in his room, and what else is there for him to do? He blew this opportunity to be Champion Charlie Brown and is now Failure Face once again. So what's there left to—
But did you notice something, Charlie Brown? What's that? The world didn't come to an end.
Oh my gosh. You're right.
So in case you didn't realize it by now, the moral of this movie is, dog crap happens. You're going to be a failure face sometimes. Hell, there may be times where you're an even bigger outcast than you used to be. But that doesn't mean the world's over, and you can still find a chance to be a winner if you work extra hard to find it like you did before. That's a very powerful and adult message that many children's films won't touch, but Charles Schulz knew it was a valuable one for kids and would serve them well to teach it to them. I think the last big thing I want to discuss is the ending. Charlie Brown is already starting to realize this lesson and decides to kick the football with Lucy allegedly off guard.
Welcome home, Charlie Brown.
At first I thought this was a complete betrayal to the message of the story, but then I realized it wasn't at all. When you screw up, your life won't fully improve just like that. You build it up slowly over time and get small improvements like a welcome home from those originally mad at you. And judging by the ending of the Peanuts movie, it looks like he did work extra hard to get that happy ending. So this is why I think this is the best Peanuts movie ever, for giving us a story that was powerful, adult, and relatable. I mean, at the end of the day, we are all
a boy named Charlie